Hey, what's going on, everybody? Brendan here, Mission Driven Ventures. I'm laughing because I've tried to make this video like 4 times and I keep getting phone calls or people knocking on the door or whatever, just interrupting me. But in today's video, we're going to be talking about homeschool in 2024. And should you do it? What are some of the obstacles? I'm sure that if you are considering homeschooling, or at least in 2024, you're probably dealing with some barriers that you're working through. And so I'm going to talk about our story and why we journeyed into homeschooling. I'm also going to talk a little bit about those barriers and what encouraged us to overcome those. So stick around to the end because I'm going to get through that list, and I think that'll resonate with you if you're kind of exploring homeschooling in 2024. And at the top of this, I want to say also, we are actually going to be starting a resource network around homeschooling. And so I'm a homeschool dad, and there are not a lot of people out there that are encouraging others in the homeschool world from like the perspective of a dad. So I'm hoping to do a little bit more of that on my channel. It's one of the things that I care about. I do care about business and entrepreneurship, and those things are kind of integrated into my family life. And so, of course, it would make sense to talk about homeschool. So if you like the content, thumbs up, subscribe, all that stuff. But more importantly, if you're a homeschooler, go ahead and join our resource network because we're going to be adding some content through that exclusively on email. We're going to be building that up over time. And honestly, it's just a great way to support and encourage us in the journey. So let's get into it. So my wife and I have 4 kids, and she did not actually want to do homeschooling when we started talking about school for our kids. She had a lot of the barriers that many of you face in terms of, can she do it? Is she equipped? Is she capable? Do we have the time? Does it make sense for her to kind of be at home instead of working? She was a registered nurse. There are all sorts of decisions that we had to make, and honestly, it was really hard. It was hard to decide whether we wanted to do that. I was more pro this because of some of the things I'm going to talk about here in a moment. But ultimately, it was a process and a journey of us deciding. And so I imagine that if you're on that journey, you should take your time and don't make the decision lightly because it is a big decision to make. But here's the number one reason that we chose to make the decision to homeschool, is that we wanted to be the ones in charge of the spiritual direction and the values that our kids are learning. In addition to that, we wanted to be in charge of their educational roadmap because we think that your education should lead you to being a better citizen, a better person, should lead you to be a net blessing to the world. There's a great quote by a pastor named Vodi Bakum. It's often quoted in the homeschool community, but it's, when you send your kids to Caesar, don't be surprised that they come back Romans. And if you want to raise your children up and give them the values that you have in your home, maybe you want to raise them up in a faith-based home, give them that spiritual direction. If you're sending them off 8-9 hours a day to some other environment, you're not going to be able to do that as effectively. So you shouldn't be surprised when they come back and they're more shaped by their experiences and their public school than they are by your family values. Now, it's not the case in every single child's life, but in general, it's kind of a truism that is the case. And I've heard feedback, or I've heard pushback from folks of like, we don't want to force our spiritual beliefs, our religion on our kids. We want to let them decide for themselves. And I get that. I get the noble aspiration of giving choice to your kids. At the same time, the fallacy in that is that the world is actually not neutral. It's not as though you send your kids to public school and they come back completely a blank slate. It's not a neutral environment. In fact, in a public school, there are ideas and values being forced upon your children that you might disagree with. So it's not a neutral environment. They're not going to come back as a blank slate in order to make their own choices. They are going to be shaped by something, and it is your responsibility, and you're held to account as a parent to be the one in charge of that direction. And so we felt like homeschooling provided us the best opportunity to nurture and create an environment where our kids could grow up in their faith. They could grow up to learn and love God. They could grow up and learn to be good to others. We felt like because it was our responsibility, that we should be taking more charge of it. The other reason that we liked it is because of the flexibility and the time that it gives you back. Homeschooling has this incredible potential to maximize the time that you have with your kids. You can do school anytime. You can do school anywhere. You can do it on the road if you're on vacation. You break it up into bite-sized chunks. You can really slow down if your kid actually needs more help on something, and you can speed up if they've got the hang of something real fast. Like, you can actually tailor make it to your kids and their needs. Time is the only resource that you don't get more of, and you can't multiply it. So my question that I wrestled with is like, do we really want to send our kids away for majority of their day and get them for only a small amount of time, especially if we can afford not to do that? And I do think that's a huge obstacle for folks we'll talk about in a minute, is do you actually have the ability to step away and do homeschool from a career? There's a lot of families with two working parents, and it makes it incredibly challenging, not impossible, but I want to recognize that not everybody's afforded the ability to do that. Now, we take a financial hit by having my wife not be a nurse, but we think that it's a sacrifice that we're making that is better for our family in the long term. So those are kind of the two main reasons. I was a public school teacher, and so I don't have any issues with public school per se, only in the sense that some of the things I talked about before, about the time, the flexibility. And the other thing that I didn't have written down here on my notes, but I want to talk about, is public school has this knack of making school boring for kids. I mean, my kids right now, they don't, we call it Monday Fun Day. They go to a co-op group with their friends, and we do some fun school activities with them all together as a group. And my kids call it Monday Fun Day. Every Monday, they look forward to it. They want to go. They can't wait to go. It's going to be fun. And for whatever reason, public school doesn't create that kind of love for learning and that sense of wonder and awe and inspiration. And it doesn't do that. And with homeschooling, you actually get the ability to encourage that and to foster that sense of wonder and concern over their own learning and owning their own learning journey. So we love that about it. But let's talk about the pitfalls, or at least the perceived pitfalls, and why you might be hesitant. The number one thing that I hear from people that don't homeschool is, what about socializing your kids? Aren't they going to be weird? And I think this is a concern that's kind of dated. Back maybe in the 90s, homeschool kids were weird and there weren't a lot of resources and they were just kind of like the oddball family. But today, I mean, there's co-ops where your kids can be in groups together where they're learning. There's extracurriculars, like my kids are playing sports and doing all sorts of stuff. There's church community events. I mean, they get so much social interaction that they don't need school to get those interactions. The other thing is that they actually interact with people of all different backgrounds and different abilities and different cultures. And my kids get more of an opportunity to do that because, they're with us all the time and they're engaging. They're just going about life alongside us. And that's a huge benefit to homeschooling. So the concern about socialization is not really a concern anymore. There's so many resources for you. And in fact, that's part of what we're building in our email newsletter. So if you did sign up for it, you'll get more information about those kinds of resources available to you in your areas. The second thing that I hear as a concern is, doubt about academic performance and wondering if it's going to be the same level of education. And it comes in two forms. Usually it's a parent saying, I'm not a qualified teacher, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to teach this. And what I would say to that is, I was a public school teacher, and I can tell you, yes, you can teach your kids. It's really not that hard. Now, if you were trying to teach them advanced calculus and kind of string theory or some high-level mathematics or physics thing, then yes, maybe that might outrank your abilities a little bit. But primarily what you're teaching your kids in grade school is how to learn, how to think, how to enjoy learning, how to find the answers to what they need. And the same way that you're going to teach them, you can actually find out those things. And so if you're learning about the Industrial Revolution and you don't think you know everything, well, you have the same resources that you're going to be giving to your children. And so you can learn just as much as they can. And so that would be my encouragement to you, is that yes, you can do it. In fact, there are lots of homeschool moms that are doing that and lots of homeschool dads that are doing this as well. The other thing that I wanted to mention as well when it comes to doubts is, are they going to get as good of an education and how are they going to perform? I was highly concerned about this for my kids. How are they going to perform compared to their peers in a public school? Usually due to the lack of standardized testing. And the reality is they do well. They do great. The research shows they do better, on par or better than traditionally schooled peers. And so the research is in on that. They do really, really well. So I'm less concerned about that. It is a little weird not to have standardized tests, but if I want to benchmark my kids' progress, it's easy to see whenever I see them with their peers that are traditionally schooled. I can see that they're either on pace or like, oh, my kids are a little bit sharper on that particular subject. The last thing that I want to mention here is that a lot of families worry about the time that it takes or the financial constraints, because you might have to go down to a one-parent home or a one working parent home. That's going to impact the income, and that's definitely something that you need to consider. But the beauty of homeschooling is that the schedules can vary. They can be flexible. You can work around your job commitments. And so if that's you and you're like, man, I just don't know if I have the time, I don't know if I can quit my job, like all those things, those are big decisions. And I don't want to assume to give you the right to make those decisions. But a lot of families, they're able to do it, and because of how flexible homeschooling is. And then you are going to save some money on some of the school-related expenses, transportation, uniform, any extracurricular fees that you pay at school. And there are free and low-cost resources available to you. My newsletter that we're beginning here being one of them. And so there's assistance, and there's all sorts of help for you if you're in that place. So here would be my big encouragement to you. If you are watching this video and looking at homeschool for 2024, I would say we have not regretted it, not a single moment. And if you are considering doing it, there is all sorts of help available to you. If you do have additional questions or concerns or comments or things that you're processing through, leave a comment below. I'd love to address them and talk to you about it. Join our newsletter, subscribe to the channel for more content like this as we put out more. But join our newsletter, and then we're going to be forming a community around that, and we can help you along the way. So thanks for watching. God bless.